Thanks. I love the music, always makes me chuckle. It's great to be here. My name is Carmen Palacios-Berraquero. I'm founder and CEO of New Quantum, and we're a company fully focused on building the networking infrastructure that we will need to be able to interconnect QPUs together and form large distributed quantum systems faster and deploy them in commercial data centers. 2024 has been a great year for quantum. I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism, and we've also done good progress to really de-risk this essential technology that up until now has been somewhat overlooked in the industry. And I think today we can all be much more confident that we will be able to use quantum interconnects as a viable and complementary tool in our scaling tool arsenal to really get to value faster. So today I'll talk about a little bit about that progress, but also an overview of what is distributed quantum computing. And I'll also try and give some timelines as to when we think we will be able to really use interconnected systems to scale commercial quantum computers. I'll start by the premise, the problem statement that we're all too familiar with, which is the scaling problem. You know, the problems that we're all excited about will require hundreds of thousands of qubits or millions of qubits. And each qubit type faces different scaling challenges. Some is about the number of actual qubits that you can fit in a chip, yield, manufacturing yields, cryogenic cooling requirements, laser delivery requirements. These are the topic. These problems are the topic of a lot of research. You know, the reasons that will enable or prevent qubits to scale to millions in a single QPU will continue to change throughout our lifetime. Most QPU companies are confident that they can get to thousands of qubits in a single QPU. Some of them are confident that they can get to tens of thousands, even though that's usually a little bit later. But the truth is that there's uncertainty and risk as to exactly where we can get to monolithically, and there's uncertainty and risk as to when that will happen. And if anyone in the room has ever tried to raise VC funds, you'll know that time to market is the key question for us, right? What will make us succeed or fail as an industry is getting to value sooner than the world gets tired of giving us money. So this uncertainty and predictability of timeline, I think, is a really crucial point. So distributed quantum computing has appeared as a potential complementary solution to try and bring in some faster scalability and some predictability to those timelines. But I've noticed that recently there's been this narrative that's built up, which is will the world be monolithic or distributed? Which architecture will win, monolithic or distributed? In classical computing, we would say scale up versus scale up. And if there is one thing that I'd like people to take home is that every single large compute system exists with both. And every large compute system continues to benefit from progress along these complementary axes. Better single modules and better ways of aggregating them together. So it's easy to understand why it's important to do scale up, to build better GPUs, CPUs, QPUs. But why is scale out important? I'll talk about the reasons why it's important in all compute systems, and then a specific reason for quantum that I think is very important as well. First of all, it's faster, right? You're always going to be able to build a larger system by interconnecting modules that already exist and the time it will take to get there monolithically. And even when you do get there monolithically, you can still build a bigger system if you interconnect many of those QPUs. Then the time to build that system, the risk of building it and the predictability of building it is more attractive because you're putting together things that you already know how to make rather than something that you've never made before. And lastly, higher reliability and uptime. I mean, modularity is our friend. Modularity is our friend in any industry that relies on engineering. And here is the same. It's really useful to be able to swap components in and out, especially in a large and complex system. This last reason takes a really kind of important kind of character in quantum, because we're all familiar with the fact that the depth of circuit that one can run on a QPU is ultimately limited by the fact that every once in a while, you need to stop and recalibrate your QPU. In a modular system, that wouldn't happen, right? You can recalibrate these modules sequentially, but the uptime continues to be there, so you're not limited in the depth of circuit that you can run by this calibration time. I think this is a really, really important reason, and something that we struggle with as an industry. So really, it's not one versus the other. It's working together to try and get to value faster. The problem has been that up until now, the technologies in support of distributed quantum computing have come much later than those in support of monolithic computing, which to an extent makes sense. So the first 2-qubit gate, local 2-qubit gate, came much before a distant entanglement, and QEC codes that are appropriate for monolithic systems came years before ones that are appropriate for distributed systems. Our aim at New Quantum is to shorten this time and to bring to the industry an interconnect technology that we can rely on, that is high performance, high manufacturability, and that we can start to rely on as part of the industry's roadmap. So what is distributed quantum computing? Let's start with the basics. So we have a monolithic QPU there. There's qubits inside, and these qubits are connected together with a particular native connectivity, depending on the qubit type. That can be nearest neighbors or all-to-all. Right. So a distributed computer is one where you've got many of these QPUs, and you're building remote entanglement links between the QPUs. The same entanglement that exists inside the QPUs, but between QPUs. And what you create is many nodes that are all entangled together, forming one coherent computer. That is what we mean with distributed quantum computing, just for no doubt. So how do we get there? I'll talk about the networking stack first. So you start with an interface. In classical computing, we've got a network interface card. Here we've got a qubit photon interface, but essentially what this means is there's a device that makes a qubit emit a photon, and that photon is entangled with the state of the qubit. This happens in 2 locations at the same time. So the 2 qubits that you want to entangle are emitting these photons, and these photons are entangled with the state of the qubit. Okay. Photons arrive at what we call a router, the equivalent of a router, via a switch, which has previously selected which 2 nodes you want to entangle, and they arrive at something called a Bell state measurement. The photons are interfered at a beam splitter, and if they're exactly the same, if they're indistinguishable, then a quantum interference will happen, and the path of the photons will become entangled. But then by measuring the photons, you destroy them, and essentially what happens is that you swap that entanglement back onto the qubits that emitted them. So the end result is what we want. There's a non-local entanglement link established between 2 qubits that are in different sites. And here, just for the avoidance of doubt, what we're talking about is they're in 2 different sites within a data center. So tens, hundreds of meters. How do we characterize the performance of this link? Exactly the same as we characterize the performance of any other entanglement link, the rate at which you can create it, and the fidelity of the entanglement. The rate depends on the number of photons that you can emit and capture at the interface, and then you try to lose the least as possible in the router. And the fidelity is determined by the fidelity of the qubit photon entanglement that you create at the interface. And then you try and introduce as fewer errors as you can throughout the router. So you see, it's really this interface between the qubit and the photon that creates the first entanglement, and this is sort of the upper bound in the overall performance that you can get. After that, you only lose. So the interface is really, this source of entanglement is really important. Up until now, remote entanglement experiments have mostly been carried out in academia, So there's been huge progress. I want to call out the careers of people like Chris Monroe and David Lucas. The state of the art recently this year was improved substantially, but these metrics are still not quite enough to support commercial distributed quantum computing. And that's where New Quantum comes in. These problems are really complex multidisciplinary engineering problems that are really better suited for a company to tackle. So back to the importance of the interface. These academic experiments have created this first qubit photon entanglement by capturing photons that are emitted by ions or atoms in free space, just with a simple lens and collecting into fiber. This has a semi-fundamental limit of about 2% collection efficiency, which just means that your system is always going to be very, very low performance. New Quantum's approach and the sort of well-understood approach for this to be much more higher performance is an optical resonator. So this is an optical microcavity that is placed around the qubit, which means that you create, that the qubit basically emits photons in just one direction that are more easily collected into fiber. The increase that you get is really significant, and the impact on of that increase on the entanglement rate is 2 orders of magnitude. So that's what we start. There's a few other really important advantages of the microcavity. It allows us to create this new entanglement protocol that allows us to get time-encoded photons rather than polarization encoded, which is much more scalable. Photons that are close to telecom wavelength. It's robust to excitation errors and ultimately higher fidelity, which is, key metric that we care about. These microcavities are extremely hard to build. We've been working on them for a long time now, and I'm really excited to say that we now have the best microcavities in the world. These cavities are now measuring 200,000 finesse. We've achieved sub-nanometer, perfect smoothness and perfect shape of the cavities. We've achieved picometer active stabilization of these cavities at 80 picometer. We have a solution for scalable locking, so we can lock a data center's worth of cavities all together. So, you'll appreciate it why this is a kind of a problem for a company, because the kind of tolerances and precisions involved and the multidisciplinarity of the system is really high. We've now de-risked this fundamental microcavity technology, and we've put it into 2 systems. So one is a QPI, qubit photon interface for neutral atoms, and the other one is a QPI for trapped ions. These are our Gen 1 prototypes, and we will be testing them with qubits in 2025. So super excited about that. The question is, how do we integrate this with QPUs? That's something that we've also been working on with a couple of leading QPU companies. And we've come up with strategies so that you can essentially put the compute zone side to side with the networking zone or chip, so that you don't need to open up your compute chip or zone. These 2 devices would be co-packaged within the same vacuum system with a standard interface between them. This is really important so that we can both, on the compute and networking side, progress and then try to integrate in a more standard way. And really, we can kind of see where future standards are going to appear in these sort of systems. Okay, so the final piece is the quantum router. We have been developing this as well. We did a pre-launch of our first quantum networking unit. A few weeks ago, we announced a collaboration with CERN. This device has commercial off-the-shelf optics and our own control electronics. This is all about exquisite time synchronization and distribution of signals, which we've now demonstrated. Gen 2 of our product will have our own proprietary switching, which is already demonstrating lower loss and higher rate than commercially off-the-shelf switches. So with these innovations, with the interface and the router, we think we can get to first about 98% fidelity of the link, much higher rate, and then ultimately beyond 99.5 fidelity, and really quite exciting rates. And what this means is that this is now enabling distributed quantum computing. What that means for the industry is that we will be able to interconnect, in the near future, perhaps 10, perhaps a little bit more QPUs, and form a real useful distributed quantum system that has, that has a 10x in qubit number, which equates to about a 9x in quantum volume. So when do we think this can happen? So in this period, we've developed our Gen 1 interface and router. In the next period, we will be putting this together with demo qubits to do a first networking demonstration, an MVP of our entanglement fabric. And at the same time, we'll be developing our Gen 2 interface and router. And importantly, we're going to be integrating with QPU companies. At the moment, we're establishing the collaboration frameworks for that integration with more than one QPU company. And what that means for the industry and for QPU companies is that you can plan on being able to do a 10x on your best QPU really within 3 to 5 years. And you'll be thinking, oh, okay, so then what? Can this technology take us all the way? Can this technology take us to fault tolerance? This has been a question mark in the field. The question being, you've all worked so hard to get to many nines of fidelity inside the QPU. What happens if now you interconnect them with noisier links? I've quoted there that we can get to 99.5 or a little bit beyond. That's still, 10x worse. What happens? Does it all turn to mush? That was an outstanding question for the field, and I won't really talk about it today, but just teeing up some results that we'll be publishing in January. We've been working hard on this distributed quantum error correction, and our results show that distributed fault-tolerant computing is possible. Distributed fault-tolerant computing is possible even when the networking links are noisier than the local links. And the key point is that it's as efficient as monolithic fault tolerance with the surface code because we can use these new high-rate codes. And here, the point is that this is the diagram that I showed earlier about a distributed quantum computer. But really, when you network, you're able to create these long-range entanglement links between any QPU. And so what we found is that by adding just a little bit of sparse long-range connectivity onto the whole system, you're able to use these high-rate codes and you get an instant boost in the overall system efficiency. Okay, so I'll just talk a little bit about who we are. We spun out of the University of Cambridge back in 2018. We're a team of about 60 people at the moment. We're the largest pure-play quantum networking company today. We have public collaborations with Cisco, the National Quantum Computing Center, and CERN. We have our headquarters in Cambridge and just launched an office in Los Angeles. We form an incredible, really diverse, really multidisciplinary team, which is behind the advances that I just showed. And a few of them are here at the conference, so please, you'll see them with new quantum jackets, so do speak to them. And I'll just leave this slide and perhaps take some questions. But this slide is about why we should care about distributed quantum computing now if you're different people in the quantum industry. So if you're a QPU company, if you're a CTO of a QPU company, this is really a risk mitigation for your R&D roadmap. If you're a CEO of a QPU company, this is a way that you can eventually sell more QPUs, and we can unlock orders of magnitude more investment into the field if we can build large distributed systems. If you're a hyperscaler, you should care about this because you can count on an instant leap in qubit numbers, leaps of the sort that are not really usual in the industry. And by creating distributed systems, we can accelerate the maturity of these systems and their robustness and the availability. And ultimately, if you're an end user, you should care because we will be able to more predictably and faster get to higher utility, so solving problems for the industry. I'll finish with that. Thank you, and take any questions.
Thanks, Carmen. We have one question. When the entanglement fails, does that mean the qubits decohere, or can you retry the entanglement right away?
You can. It's a attempt until success sort of measurement. It's a probabilistic measurement, but it's heralded. So you try until you get an entanglement, and when you get an entanglement, you know that that's happened, and so you feed that back to the nodes, and you can carry out a computation. That's why the signal distribution and synchronization is so important so that you can tell the system when the entanglement has happened.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks.